Um, my mother passed away about 8 years ago, but before she passed away, this is from Santa Clara, and that hill in the back is a volcanic core from Jemez Mountains, one of the biggest volcanoes, and we have a lot of pumice there too. But one of the languages that I had learned, that my mother and I roamed the hills for glorious months on end, looking at these rocks and rock patterns that were happening all through the landscape. And more that they were invisible at first. We saw nothing. And then all of a sudden, day after day, walk after walk, suddenly started seeing all these amazing patterns and circles and triangle stones and different color ones that when we started noticing seemed to all point at the same mountain. All the white ones were pointing to one mountain. All the blue ones were pointing to the other mountains. There were stones set upright that were that pointed to where something became centered, right, into the landscape. And I became so amazed that at first we thought, is this intentional? Was it somebody putting them there? And the more and more I was going, yes, I don't know who, I don't know how, but it doesn't matter. It became a language, right? Oh, I'm going backwards. This is cut off. Interesting. So the verticals are going to be cut off. I don't know if that's fixable. Interesting. Anyway, there's going to be a lot of verticals in there. This will make it interesting. You can see the circle with the stone in the center. Can you guys see that? And unfortunately cut off, the top is it pointing to a mountain that's totally centered in the whole. So you're seeing all this amazing relationship between, if you stood there and you saw two mountains and a hill perfectly centered there, there would be a rock pattern there if you stood and you looked closely, right? Over and over and over again. Oh, they're all cut off. This is going to be interesting. I wonder why you can't shrink it. There's no way to. I wonder why there, even that's still cutting it off. Interesting. Oh, because it sized it to be the width of. There you go. There you go. You can see where it lines up. You can see where that rock at the bottom with the groove and lined with that's the tallest peak along that little range in the canyon, right? You could see rocks lined up to a Black Mesa, that is called always, right? And I've become quite good at this language. I could start to see the same language in France, in Slovakia, in Ireland, in all over, right? Which was amazing, because all of a sudden, I felt at home wherever I was as soon as I looked for the rocks, and I could see what they were saying, right? And where they wanted me to pay attention to, where they wanted me to focus. And I was thinking, oh, that's kind of what language is for us. And this is, language is a pattern, right? And and patterns teach us about relationship and our spaces that we creating home. What is creating home, right? What is what makes the difference between a house and a home? And it's a language. It's a building language, right? And the spaces that we live in are like water flowing through these spaces daily, all the time, over and over and over again, and we keep carving canyons into them, and they are creating us as much as we are creating them, our spaces, right? And it reminds me of the quote this morning. What was it? What was that wonderful quote? Your buildings are building you, right? Same thing. Here's my world, right? So this is a Puye up above, and this is the volcanic volcanic stones that they can carve out of it, and amazing shapes and amazing spaces that they had to flow through daily, in and out. And by the way, you see wonderful rocks that are in pattern there. But clay plaster on the walls, still there, right? And they would have clay floors. That's a clay walls to build in where the stone wasn't. And inside those spaces, the view that you see, your perception that you see, is so beautifully defined, right? So that, there's a story in Tewa that is Spider Old Woman. And to be able to find a home when they show up, every pueblo that I've been on in the whole Southwest is always centered within the larger landscape. If you stand on any pueblo site and look around in 360-degree view, you will see a ring of mountains or hills, but it'll be complete, and you'll feel like you're always in the center. And the story was that whenever they were finding a new place to settle, they would bless the site, and Spider Old Woman would come, and she would spread her 8 legs and arms, 8 directions, till it was the center, and that's where they would build, right? So for me, creating home has a whole lot to do about finding center, right? And how do we find center? How do we find where we are, not within just ourselves, but within the larger environment, right? Within that bigger context all around us. This is Taos Pueblo. Beautiful, all mud, right? Mud ovens in front and mud hills. I'm sure it's in a ring surrounded by it, but it's also mimicking the mountains behind it. This is Santa Clara Pueblo, where I'm from. Not this time, not 1897, but you can see there's very little trees. The mud just comes up out of the ground. This is me at 1983, I think. First straw bale house. So for me, I realized I'm constantly been just trying to create home wherever I go. I'm not a builder. I'm not a natural builder. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just constantly always trying to create home. And I've created a language. One is passive soul, right? I want the sun. I want warmth. I want comfort. This was a little small place I lived in, had my first 2 children in it, and sold it. Left met my husband in Arizona, where he let me know I did not, we started doing workshops together. Here's our setting. There's our site down below. Here's some straw clay blocks that we're making. We teach workshops doing straw, good insulation. For me, it's about the comfort. You get thick, what does that say? Interesting. I'm going to show you a slight thing on the terms of creating home. This is our house, our present day house, but in the late 1800s. So it's an original adobe made from the clay off the site. It was beautiful back then, but then people have taken it, and it sort of got, as all old houses, they sort of grow with the families, and they expand and grow. This is what it looks like today. So it's got clay plaster, clay paints on the outside. That's a clay plaster. Here is the original inside. And I want to show you what you can do with some adobe clay walls and some clay paint and some clay plaster, how much you can transform a place, right? Here's the original. Here's some straw bale benches built in, right? With clay, with a mud floor added in. Cob ovens in the corner. Even if they're not lit, and built-in benches. There's a lot that you can do with homes that are already existing, right? That you can transform and give the sense of home, give warmth to it, easily, cheaply. There's built-in nook spaces. Children love, this is the fort, boys' fort underneath, so they could shoot at workshop participants out the window, right? And you get, I think we're creatures of needing various heights so that you feel different, whether you're laying down or curl up in a corner. Curved, beginner, people wanting something, you know, in our culture of boxed houses, people are always wanting, we crave circle, we crave center, we crave curve. And there's so many ways to get that feeling versus just building a round house, which often is one of the most difficult, most high-skilled things you can do and will always cost usually double than what you can. But things like outdoor round benches or patio walls, adding shades. This is the guest house, how we bought the place. This is it now, where again you can add this adobe curved wall on the outside and make it feel comforting and warm. Color does wonders to change the feel of a space, right? From there to there. Clay paint on the clay paints on the walls. Using sculpting and carvings to connect two buildings that didn't quite fit together, right? More curved interior walls where it doesn't cost anything extra to, the roof is simple, the walls are rectangular, but the bench is sculpted and curved, and the walls are, this is anything that is, the walls, this happens to be a small little building with polished clay walls, so you can get shiny, shiny clay walls. But the purple is actually a lime fresco, which has been plastered and then painted with pigments. More just color. Shading, building small little structures, and then one's a kitchen, one's a bedroom, and one's a bathroom, right? Without having to do it all at once, because it's a lot of work to have to do one big house at once sometimes. Simple things of introducing curves in the rounded space, right? Again, fulfills curve without adding any extra work or cost. Sculpted openings. Texture. Some of you were in my class this morning, and here's a beautiful example of that base coat, that high straw plaster finally finished out so that it's a finish, right? You get it very smooth, but still very textured. Oh, tiny pictures. Can you guys see these far away? Filling in corners with sculpted shelves, right? And then shaping them. This is cob, which you were doing, some of you were doing this morning. Here's some that's a lime fresco with some carving. So you can decorate with lime as well as with clay. Best thing of working with clay in different languages, in different countries, is you almost don't have to speak the language. By the time you've plastered a wall, mixed a mix, You don't even need to have communicated. You're bonded. These are small, simple buildings on sandbags, on simple earth bags, plastered with clay. The clay paints. It's a giant office building we did. So you can build small, you can build large. Even the ceiling is clay sculpted, right? And all the native, this is not colored clay, it's all native wild clays. Playing with vaults and domes with the mud brick, right? This is from Santa Clara, my home again, and I'm amazed at this skill that they can walk with those pots filled with water on their head. Now that's grace, right there. Pretty amazing. My mother was a potter, and she did ceramics. And it was where I learned about interior curved walls, the way the light would hit them and the spaces they would form influenced me forever. So that sculpting with clay. I'm amazed at what you can do with this little bit of clay and a lot of straw. So these are just bales stacked with no intention much. I don't know where the matching picture is. It'll come up later, but anyway. Here's a bread oven, right, sculpted out. There it is. There's the matching. Nothing but base coat, which we were doing this morning. That's it, right? Nothing but base coat over straw bale. This is just mud and straw, nothing else. These were sculptures done in the Smithsonian Museum, Native American Museum outside, that were meant to, you could see the Capitol building, Washington, D.C. They were done out there. This is what they looked like 15 years ago. This is what they look like today. But they're still there. The fine finishes are gone, but that shows you in Washington, D.C., this is not, they're not the desert. This is my two boys. There's Benito, who many of you may have met, who's been here and taught a workshop. He just married a Kiwi, not just, maybe during COVID married a Kiwi. That's partly why I'm here. She was supposed to be here with me, but got pregnant instead, and so did not fly. She's due in a couple months, so our life is about to change. Having boys that grew up doing what you do, they, as a parent, you think they are not paying attention at all. They're in their room playing, playing Halo or some war game or something. I was not a disciplinarian or a policeman, so I was like, I'm going to live my life and you guys live yours, right? So they, but all of a sudden, all of amazement, they didn't go to a day of school. So at about 12, I realized I must have ruined their life, because 8 hours, you never saw them, right, at all. Then suddenly amazing, they needed to leave home at 15. Benito went off to Mexico for 3 months. His younger brother went to New Mexico for a couple of years. They both came back transformed, right, completely, ready to do their own thing, wake up 5 o'clock and go out blacksmithing and go do woodworking and make tools for the workshop participants. I don't know what happens, but believe me, as a parent, just let them go, and then they come back like boomerangs, right? And I have not, they've been, then they went off into the world and did jobs because they had to go work for other people. And then they suddenly decided last year that we were better than everybody else. So they're back with partners, now all living with me again, right? So, anyway, this, Benito's an amazing artist. Sorry. Where is he? This is the stencils that he does, and it's all done with clay paint that he would spray through the stencils. And that's the mid-coat plaster that we were working on today. You know, that's all clay. This is his house that he's worked out, but what I'm amazed at is where you could see the nice curve he put into the painted clay floor he's got. The boys are experts at combination of metal, wood, cement, clay. Their ability in all of it is pretty amazing. I love his ability to sculpt. That's all mud, the wall behind the wood stove, and his bevels and sculpting, right? There's his younger brother, now they do a whole other way of plastering, right? And he puts that all on one wall. But they do touches, like this is all base coat again, finished out, and you know, you could do amazing things with just simple sculpting. In fact, I think that was a corner where someone was trying to fill it out and the whole thing fell out. So it was like, oh, just turn it into something. I love this leaf. We are creatures of pattern, right? I think we're programmed to see patterns and to see design and to see whatnot. Why is it not going? There it goes. I got intrigued. I grew up, my whole family are potters. So I do, they all, you know, my grandmother would in college, she'd hand me this box of pots, and she had arthritis, so she could no longer carve designs into them. So one pot, uncarved with no design, would be worth, I don't know, $100. Carve a design into it, it was worth $2,000, right? So she would send me these boxes of pots to take home and carve, and pay me $10 a box or something ridiculous. But and these are into the clay, you know, it's shiny clay, but it's cooked clay that you're carving into. But one day I'm plastering with clay going, I wonder if you can carve into it. Sure enough, it just peels right off. And so I started playing around years ago with building up layers of things that you can carve back to. This happens to be a mix of clay on the bottom, a mix of lime clay and then lime on top. That's why it could get the bright colors. Sculpting on top. This happens to be a lime straw sculpting that a lot of people have been asking me about. This is all clay, just different color layers. The white, you could see that it was done extra thick, and that's a lime on top of clay. And it was actually, whenever you're doing something in points, it tends to delaminate more. So actually, at every point, we had to nail it down, right? But two clays. This was the latest project I just did. I was in Japan, my husband and I, in the spring. And the Japanese did the umbrella type looking sculpture, and my husband was working on the little thatched one. And I was in charge of this large one doing, this is all clay, carving and clay black and white clays. And I loved it. It was called Mountain Bird, and it was reminding me of the kivas from back home. And this is a kiva. And inside you go and you go back down into the earth. And that's where they hold their religious ceremonies or communal ceremonies, is down in the kivas. And for me, it's always about coming back home and finding center, right? So I hope you all with clay can find your way back home, right? But that's the end of the slideshow. So if anyone has yes.
What are your thoughts on where you can build an example? Do you believe that?
It's always nice to go back to the native people and see what they built with, and that's will give you great insights to what, because they've been doing it for hundreds or thousands of years, right? Using the local native materials, right? And I learn and see it. Not that you can't stretch, but of course, I think clay is I forget all the numbers, but the most used building material in the world, right? In most places. Clay is found almost everywhere. And I have not come across a place where I have not been able to find clay to some degrees. We might have to drive or hunt a little harder. And clay, if you give it the most minimal amount of protection, or even slope it just a little bit, or add thickness, every inch buys you 10 years, you know, you can do an amazing amount. And so I believe in, if you can get it up off the ground, get it protected, give it its best chance possible. But yeah, and of course, and if you can't even build with it, which is sometimes a lot of work, so I was like transforming what you can do to a space is incredible with just changing the surface level, which is where you're often interacting with the building the most, right? But anyway. Anybody else? Otherwise, that speaker. Yeah.
Get some intricacy and patterns and so much precision, especially in those sort of geometrics and angles and things. Like, are you doing all of that kind of free form, or have you been practicing, because it's so precise?
Like all things, it takes some practice, but in other ways, and some of those that are very geometric, I'm going to draw it on a piece of cardboard and use a stencil, right? So that, because it's more a timing thing, you're often trying to catch the mixes at the right moment quick enough. Or I'm working with most of what you see a lot is done during workshops. So I'm working with people who have never done it before, right? And you're just managing the chaos as best as you can. But the sharpness comes with learning to use the tools, right, correctly. And once you learn to use the tools, they become your greatest friend, and they make your life easy. And I know which designs to try that will match my tools, right? And a lot of the sharpness, a lot of you saw this morning, I'm not going to fuss with it, because I know if I hit it at the right timing, it'll sharpen up. And clay, I love it because you can get a very, very refined, finished look from clay pretty easily without fussing with it, if you know the timing, yeah. But, I'm applying many layers, yes. And many layers of the same color to get thickness. And then another color. Usually about 3 layers of each color on top of each other. And then cutting it back, yeah. And I'm not changing the texture a whole lot because if you're cutting through, you have to have a pretty clean texture, else you can't cut through it, right? So, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's way easier than molding it though. And outside on the practice panels, we're doing some of them. We're going to run into good old New Zealand being much wetter and timing wise of just getting time enough for some of them to set up. But hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit of it during the conference, yeah. So, anyone else? No. Oh, there's one. You have a question? I'll take your question if you want. Oh gosh, you know that's always that's always a hard one. I think it takes a certain personality to want to work for a client, right? It's not mine. It's whenever I've done it, because you have to venture down those roads to find out what doesn't work, right? And so whenever I've gone down that road, I'm usually feeling like whenever money is involved somehow, their expectations are way higher, and what I do, the match always seems off kilter whenever I seem to have tried it. And I leave always feeling like I've sold my soul and just can't do it. So I find where I've made a living off of it, we've survived 35 years, 40, I started my first strawmill house I did 40 years ago. And we had kids, we couldn't travel, we couldn't get a job. I wouldn't let my husband get a job because I'm not going to be stuck home alone with the kids. So I said, if we can't do this together, I'm not interested, right? So he couldn't leave. I was like, and it became education. You could run workshops, you could teach, writing books does not make you money. But it's a giant calling card, right? But you don't make money off the books. But people think you know something, right? And so that at least gets them in the door, right? So I find, and I'm so thrilled. I'm watching the boys going through, interestingly, and they're in their early 30s right now. And they've gone and ventured out into the world to work for, build projects for, and until they come up with a very special client, which one of them has, but he just keeps working for the same one because he knows how bad it can get out there. And the other one, they both come back out of that world depressed, discouraged, put their heart and soul for years into something and then have the client cover it over with cement, or the client unhappy that it took, that it wasn't what they expected. I don't know what they expect, right? Gosh knows. You never know what they expect, right? And they've started teaching workshops. So they've somehow found the same pathway or finding it back. And there's something so fulfilling being able to pass on the craft or pass on the knowledge, right, to poor souls to go try it out. That is infinitely satisfying, infinitely. No, I never get tired of it, right? And I'm so excited the boys are doing it as well, yeah. But I pity you all doing it for other clients. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, yeah. Not very often. You know, they, thankfully, you know, because it gets to be too many, you know, too many people. But every now and then, and I'm amazed what people are capable of doing. And they're, you know, and some people you run across and go, oh, I don't think you should be building your house, right? We're not all meant to be builders, that's for sure, right? And I think, you know, I think there's an amazing, there's fields out there that are combining education with consulting. Actually, my younger son did what I thought was an amazing arrangement where there was this young couple wanting to build their own house. They'd never done it. They're very competent people, which helps. And they didn't have the money to afford a full-time builder. But they ran one workshop for straw bale, one workshop for plastering, and then there was a whole, and by the time you're plastering the house, you're only barely halfway through. The whole work is the other latter half, right? But they hired my son on a consulting basis to come and show them how to install one window. And then they learn it and then install 10 more. They'd come and do one electrical box, and then they'd go home and do that. And if they would hold a little conference, did we do this right, just to chat, and paid him for every time they had him on the telephone. That was a great arrangement where he wasn't stuck having to build it for them. They could afford it. They built a lovely house that all of a sudden they understood just how much work it took. And by building it themselves, they knew how to fix it when something went wrong. And now, only 2 years later, and they've been living in it, wonderful little place, living in it, now someone in the community, a young woman, wants to build a house. She can't do it by herself. So he's doing for her what my son did for him. So it passes on. It keeps going, you know, it keeps rolling on, yeah. And there's another community in Utah that's been running for quite a few years now called Community Rebuilds, where they bring students from all over the world. One contractor kind of leads them, and so it's a mix of this education with building, and they are producing pretty impressive buildings, right, for incredibly inexpensive. For custom homes, right? Yeah. So I think with these earth building, any technology that requires a whole lot of hands-on, it is a lot of work. We have to be creative. How do we be creative to form new ways of building and helping each other in the process, right? And I think there's a bunch of alternatives we haven't tapped. It used to be there more naturally when we lived in village communities, because of course you're there in a different capacity to help each other. We did a wonderful project we did down in Mexico years ago. It's because some women came, needed housing, no money, asked us to teach them how or help them. I said, okay, we'll teach you how to do it, and then you carry on. So there was a dozen women gathered. They came together. We said, we're not doing the politics. You decide who gets which house, and who, you know, you decide amongst yourself. So we came and would do one house as a work, be there for about a week and get them kind of kick-started. They would carry on. In 3 years, those 12 women, small houses, but they each had a house, you know, and they would self-regulate each other. When one wouldn't show up because they already got their house and they don't want to work for the other houses, those women would go and stand and barricade them from going in her house again, right, till she showed up to go work for the others, right? You're like, great, that's not my job, right? So. But they got it done, you know. And granted, small, but they did it, and they had homes that were cool in the winter, cool in the summer, warm in the winter, instead of these cinder block walls that were just radiating heat nonstop, right? They had comfortable homes, yeah. Good.